Hello literature connoisseurs. Let's begin chapter 7 of Nicolae. The chapter begins with Buck as he travels with Ritz the pilot. They start off by catching up on old times since they last met 2 years ago. We finally get a sliver of theology here as Buck seems to be witnessing to Ritz. Rather than talking about God or Christ, what they are talking about is hurrying up and believing because time is short. This is a typical Christian warning they often get used with the threat of hell. The general concept Christians use is that Jesus could come back at any minute, so you have to convert now. The other threat is that no one knows when they will die, so you must act now or you could die and go to hell before you make up your mind. Christianity is basically pushing high-pressure sales to get people to convert. High-pressure sales are aggressive tactics a salesperson uses to force a customer into a quick purchase by creating a sense of urgency, using manipulation, or overwhelming them with information, rather than allowing them time for careful consideration. Common examples include limited-time offer, phrases, withholding information, emotional appeals, and refusing to answer questions, all designed to control the interaction and push for immediate closure. The trouble is that when asked to prove that the threats of hell or prove their God exists, you get nothing except the Bible says so. Which does not answer the question. The Christian is forced to rely on circular reasoning because they cannot prove their claims. Threats and intimidation is all they have as a foundation. How do you know God is true? The Bible says so. How do you know the Bible is true? God says it's true when He said it in the Bible. Circular reasoning. The circular reasoning fallacy is an argument that assumes the very thing it is trying to prove is true. Instead of offering evidence, it simply repeats the conclusion, rendering the argument logically incoherent. Example: someone argues that schools should continue to have textbooks read from cover to cover because, otherwise, students would not be well educated. When asked to define what well-educated means, the person says, knowing what is in the textbooks. In this case, God is real because the Bible says so. The Bible is true because God said so. When pressed on this topic of proving their beliefs, because their beliefs are flimsy and unwell-founded, they often resort to more threats. One day, and that day may never come, you'll find out and it will be too late. Putting a twist on that claim by adding the Godfather quote. This appeal to emotion does not factor in that when a person dies that there may not be an afterlife and there might not be a way to ever find out. Oftentimes people are afraid of death because the idea that you will no longer exist is scary. People over the years have created stories to help as a coping mechanism. Ritz asks a number of what-if questions and supposedly Buck is able to answer remembering what Bruce wrote in his manifesto. He makes a claim to Buck that it must hurt to lose someone like worthless Bruce, and Buck replies by saying you have no idea. Scene changes to Rayford and apparently Leon is giving more orders to everyone. Apparently a picture is going to be taken and the pilots need to be in it, for some strange reason. They all get off the plane and Leon tells Nicolae that Hattie is waiting for him. This angers Nicolae, saying that she is not good at times like this. This is more poisoning the well because so far there have been no instances when Hattie has had to interact with the public. The poisoning the well fallacy is an informal fallacy where negative, irrelevant information about a person is presented to an audience before that person has a chance to present their case, with the intent of discrediting them and their argument from the outset. It's a type of ad hominem fallacy that attempts to prejudice the audience against the speaker, making it harder for them to be heard or believed, regardless of the validity of their argument. In this case they are trying to make their character look bad as they set up the next part of the scene. Nicolae exits the plane and he looks dignified yet mournful for the reporters, and suddenly Hattie runs towards him and jumps up and hugs him. This leaves Nicolae feeling embarrassed and humiliated. She tries to kiss him but he pulls away and whispers something to her, then grabs her wrist as he addresses the reporters. Scene changes to Buck as they land in Israel. Buck reminisces on how he first met Chaim and how important he has become. Basically the rest of the chapter is rehashing events that had already been described in previous chapters and books. As I said at the end of my last video, this entire chapter is filler. The only really interesting thing to point out is again the author's use of creative license. It gets mentioned that the two fakes in Israel have declared that if anyone tries to harm Sion ben Judah they will take it as an attack against their own lives. This is something the Bible does not record in that they can share their protection to anyone they want. In this we get the writer's creative license that they get to add things that are not biblical. This seems odd considering how rigid Christians pretend to be when they state that nothing in the Bible changes until every jot and tittle is fulfilled. Yet despite this they change meanings whenever it suits them. Especially if it's a verse that they do not like. Examples: happy is he that dashes a baby against rocks. And disobedient children are to be stoned to death. They claim that those verses are mere metaphors. Man shall not lie with another man, they should be stoned. That becomes the gospel truth. However, in reality it is more hypocritical. Can anyone think of a single argument they use that is not a fallacy or an appeal to emotion? If God were true, then why must he and his followers result in tactics that scammers use to scam their victims? Would not a real God know better? This ends chapter 7 of Nicolae. See you next time for chapter 8.